The moment this little boy stepped onto the stage, no one expected what was about to happen, but by the end, the entire crowd would be on their feet, screaming, crying, and witnessing something they'd never forget, so stay with me. Because this story might just give you chills, and hey, if moments like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be seen. The lights were dim, the audience restless. It was just another local talent show, the kind where people clap politely and scroll through their phones between acts. Parents sat with mild smiles, judges shuffled papers, and the host forced excitement into his voice. Then, a small figure walked onto the stage. He couldn't have been older than 10. His name was Danny. Wearing an oversized white suit, slightly wrinkled, with a cheap plastic microphone in his hand, he looked more like a kid playing dress-up than a serious performer. Some people in the crowd chuckled softly. A few whispered, "What is this kid going to do?" Danny stood in the center, his tiny hands trembling. The spotlight hit his face, and for a brief moment, fear took over. His eyes searched the crowd, until they found one person, his mom. She sat in the third row, holding her breath, her eyes full of hope and worry. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "You can do this." And that's when everything changed. The music started. It was an old, iconic tune. Slow at first. Recognizable. But no one reacted yet. They were still expecting something average, something forgettable. Then Danny opened his mouth. And the room froze. His voice didn't sound like a child's. It was rich. Deep. Emotional. Every note carried a strange kind of maturity, like he had lived 100 lives already. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Even the judges leaned forward. The boy who looked like a joke just seconds ago was suddenly commanding the entire room. With each lyric, he stepped deeper into the performance. His movements, his expressions, even the way he held the mic, it was like he had transformed into someone else entirely. Confidence replaced fear. Passion replaced doubt. But what the audience didn't know was the story behind that voice. Danny hadn't always been this brave. A year ago, he barely spoke in school. Kids would laugh at him not because he was loud, but because he was too quiet. He was the kind of kid who sat in the back of the class, invisible, unnoticed. Teachers worried about him. Classmates ignored him. And at home, things were even harder. His father had left when he was very young. It was just him and his mom, struggling to make ends meet. She worked long hours, often coming home exhausted, but she never stopped encouraging him. One night, she found him sitting alone in the dark, listening to old music on a broken radio. That's when she heard him humming, softly, almost like he didn't want anyone to notice. But she did. From that day on, she made sure he never stopped. She couldn't afford expensive lessons. She couldn't buy him fancy equipment. But she gave him something far more powerful, belief. And now, standing on that stage, all those quiet nights, all those moments of doubt, all those tears, were turning into something magical. Back in the present, the performance was reaching its peak. Danny hit a high note perfectly. A woman in the front row gasped. A man stood up. Then another. And another. The energy in the room shifted completely. People weren't just watching anymore, they were feeling. By the time the chorus hit, the entire crowd was clapping along. Some were singing. Others had tears in their eyes. It wasn't just about talent anymore, it was about heart. Danny closed his eyes for the final note. And when the music stopped, there was silence. Just 1 second. Then, the crowd exploded. Cheers echoed through the hall. People jumped to their feet. The judges were clapping, smiling in disbelief. Someone shouted, "That's a star right there." Danny stood still, overwhelmed. He looked out at the sea of faces, all cheering for him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. He mattered. And then he looked at his mom. She was crying. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness, but the kind that come from seeing a dream come true. She covered her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief, as if she couldn't believe this was her son, the same boy who once hid from the world. Danny smiled. A small, quiet smile, but one filled with pride, relief, and something new, confidence. When he walked off that stage, everything had changed. Not just for the audience, who would remember that performance forever, but for Danny himself. He had found his voice. And sometimes, that's all it takes. So if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, like no one sees you, like your moment will never come, remember Danny. Because the world doesn't always notice you right away. But when it does, it can go absolutely wild. And if this story gave you even a little bit of hope, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because you never know whose story might inspire you next. The judges were already losing interest, the audience was whispering, and some people were even getting up to leave, but what happened next made the entire crowd lose their minds, so don't skip this, because this story will give you goosebumps. And if you love emotional, powerful moments like this, make sure you like the video and subscribe, because this one is unforgettable. It was a packed auditorium that evening. Bright lights, a buzzing crowd, and a stage that had already seen dozens of average performances. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. Just another talent show slowly dragging toward its end. Then his name was called. Next up, 11-year-old Ryan. A small boy walked onto the stage. He looked nervous. His hands were shaking slightly, and his steps were slow, almost hesitant. He wore a simple outfit: black pants, a white shirt, and a hairstyle that looked like he tried really hard to copy someone famous. Some people noticed it. A few smiled. Others didn't care. One of the judges leaned over and whispered, "Another kid trying to be a singer." The audience wasn't expecting much. Ryan stood at the center, gripping the microphone tightly. The spotlight felt too bright. The crowd felt too big. For a second, it looked like he might walk off. But then, he closed his eyes. And in that moment, everything else disappeared. Because for Ryan, this wasn't just a performance. This was his only chance. You see, Ryan didn't grow up in a world full of applause. He grew up in silence and struggle. His father used to sing all the time. Old songs. Classic hits. The kind of music that made you feel something deep inside. Ryan would sit beside him for hours, watching, listening, learning. But one day, the music stopped. His father passed away after a long illness, leaving behind nothing but memories, and an old collection of songs that Ryan would listen to every night. That's where it started. Ryan didn't just sing those songs, he felt them. Every lyric reminded him of his father. Every note carried a piece of him. And one artist stood above all. The legend. The king. Ryan didn't just admire Elvis Presley, he connected with him. The voice, the style, the emotion, it was like finding a bridge between his past and his future. Back on stage, the music finally began. A slow, familiar instrumental filled the air. At first, no one reacted. But then Ryan started singing. And everything changed. His voice wasn't just good, it was powerful. Smooth, controlled, and filled with raw emotion. It didn't sound like a kid trying to impress people. It sounded like someone telling a story, a real one. The judges looked up instantly. The audience stopped whispering. Ryan moved slightly, his body swaying with the rhythm, channeling that classic Elvis style. The confidence that was missing just seconds ago suddenly appeared. It was like he wasn't alone on that stage anymore. It felt like something bigger was happening. Halfway through the performance, a woman in the audience wiped away tears. A man in the back stood up, shaking his head in disbelief. Even the host backstage peeked out, completely stunned. This wasn't normal. This was special. Ryan hit a note high, strong, and flawless. The crowd erupted into applause mid-performance. That almost never happens. But he didn't stop. He kept going, pouring everything he had into every word. You could hear the pain, the love, the memories. It wasn't just music anymore, it was emotion turned into sound. And then came the final moment. The music softened. Ryan stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his voice dropping into a gentle, emotional tone. His eyes opened slowly, and for the first time, he looked directly into the audience. As he sang the last line, his voice cracked. Just slightly. But it wasn't a mistake. It was real. And that's what made it perfect. The music ended. Silence. A deep, heavy silence filled the room. For 1 second, 2 seconds. And then, the entire audience exploded. People jumped to their feet. Cheers, whistles, applause, it was deafening. Some were crying openly. Others were shouting his name. The judges stood up, clapping harder than anyone else. One judge even said, "That wasn't just a performance, that was a moment." Ryan stood there, frozen. He couldn't believe it. For the first time since his father passed away, he felt something different. Not sadness. Not emptiness. But pride. He looked up, as if hoping, just for a second, that somewhere, his father was watching. And maybe he was. Backstage, his mother broke down in tears, covering her face as she watched her son receive the kind of love he had always deserved. When Ryan finally walked off the stage, he wasn't the same boy who had walked on. He was stronger. Braver. Seen. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One moment. One song. One chance to show the world who you really are. So if